refreshed and ready to go. Holly and the staff at OGA and directors have put together a panel session. How long is it, Lizzie? So we got an hour for this panel session, and we're very privileged to have 3 people. We're going to have Dan on the panel as well, but he unfortunately can't be with us today. So we've got 3 new entrant growers stroke gardeners on the panel today. And one of the main topics we've been looking at in terms of the OGA directorship and staff is how we attract more diversity into the Organic Growers Alliance. And also, obviously, new entrants is a major area that we also want to focus on and have been focusing on for a while. Within, with our collaboration with the Land Workers Alliance, we've got a training work going on, which Lizzie and me have been attending. But it'd be great today to hear from 3 people that have had a lot of experience in this sort of area, and we really are looking forward to hearing what they've got to say about diversity, in particular. And it's fair to say, I think, that diversity within farming organisations is pretty scarce sometimes. And I think the OGA have been aware for a while now that we certainly should be, although the membership has probably got a fair bit of diversity within it, I think we need to look at the diversity within the directorship, obviously, and that's something we've been trying to grapple with for a while now. So it's great to have 3 people who are going to talk about it to us today, and hopefully we can engage with online participants and people in the room to ask questions about what's been talked about. So who would like to kick off? Anyone especially keen?
Introduce ourselves.
Yes, please. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm not going to speak very long.
No, that's fine. As long as you feel comfortable with.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's nice to have this as my first interaction with the.
Sorry, can I just move this over a bit, because then it will be.
Can you guys hear me on the Zoom?
Here online? Yeah, there's a thumbs up from Holly.
Hello, lovely to see your faces and also people in the room. My name's Naomi Terry. I work for the Ecological Land Cooperative and have done for the last year on a project called Jumping Fences, which is, the first stage of this project that I've been coordinating has been a research project looking at racial justice within British farming. Specifically, I've been going out and interviewing different Black people and people of colour that are working in the farming industry or kind of land-based work, and learning about their experiences of that. So that's been a range of people from new entrants to people that are much more established and own land and manage farms themselves. And all of that is collated in this beautiful, might I say, Jumping Fences report that came out in January. And I've got some copies here if anybody wants a hard copy. I'm desperate not to take them home with me, so please grab one. And yeah, I'm not gonna list off all the findings and recommendations that came out of that, but maybe we'll get into some of the things that come out through the questions, and kind of just reflecting upon what Pete's just said about kind of, there's diversity is a question at all these different levels. Having people in positions of power that represent a broader spectrum of the society that we live in really makes a difference for the way that decisions are made. And I think that that's really important when it comes to shifting narratives and shifting the culture, which are really the deeper leverage points when it comes to influencing diversity, because we can do a lot of more shallow interventions, encouraging broader representation and participation, for example, in traineeships and giving people more access financially, and those things are all really important as well. But without the kind of deeper narrative shifts around what farming looks like and who farmers look like, and how we can farm in this country, which actually can be really diverse, not only in identity, but also in practices, that's really necessary to kind of facilitate the more material or more shallow changes that maybe definitely are needed. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'll say for now. I guess from a personal perspective, prior to working at the Ecological Land Cooperative, I've worked as an ecologist in Worcestershire and California and Botswana. And I'm currently, I would love to be a new entrant farmer myself, but I'm not quite there yet, actually. I'm a gardener in South London. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. Any preferences?
Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Sparrow Middleton. I work at Tolhurst Organics, which is a stock-free organic farm in Reading, and the farmer there is Ian Tolhurst, who many of you will know. And I'm coming into my 3rd year of growing there now. And I have recently, now I'm the head grower there, well, with Tolly's direction, of course. I don't think he will ever retire. Last night was his 70th birthday, so we were celebrating in the pub. So yeah, I come from a working class background in Yorkshire. I had no farming background in my family. I think neither did Tolly, and maybe part of that we sort of resonated with. So I'm also like, I have a young child, so coming to Tolhurst just after the birth, or just before the birth of my child, it was quite a stressful first year trying to manage intensive growing and having a child. So like there's a lot of things that I could probably speak about that, you know, to support growers, especially new entrant growers, especially at that time in their life, you know, because that's a lot to take on. But yeah, I think a combination of luck. I think I just got really lucky that Tolly needed someone at the time when I got in there, and also persistence, because yeah, it was really hard, and there's many times where I think both of us were like, do I walk away or do I stay, or what, you know, it was really difficult juggling life work balance, but persisting because of the passion to do what I love to do there, and especially the stock-free organic movement. You know, I have a lot of passion for that. So yeah, how could we be supported a bit more? Like, you know, I think having possibly from the OGA, possibly we could offer some sort of more guidance and help in between, mediating between farmers and the new entrants. You know, listening to both needs, because both have a lot of needs and requirements that need to be met in order to work together and function in life and on the farm. So yeah, I think some more support from that would be really good. But yeah, maybe somebody else wants to say something.
Great, thank you for your honesty. That's really, really interesting.
Hi everyone, my name is Nell Benney. I was a new entrant farmer for about 4 years, and yeah, in that time I was an assistant grower, seasonal labourer, and I also managed a really small market garden in the Farm Start network. And now I'm a PhD student, and I'm looking at labour conditions on agroecological farms. And this research is really brought out of my own experiences working in the sector. Those are my colleagues and my friends, and also a large part out of a research project I did last year, where I I surveyed 37 trainees, and I interviewed 10 of them about their experiences on their traineeship programs. And yeah, I think I'm probably quite a classic example of a new entrant who worked, yeah, for about 4 years. I've seen like 4 or 5 quite common, and then got a bit burnt out and left to pursue a different career. And so I think when I think about, yeah, barriers to new entrants, I really think about how to retain people in the industry. It's definitely getting a broader group involved and broadening that accessibility 100%. But then when we're doing that, we've also got to think, what are we inviting people into, and are they going to want to keep the jobs which they get when they get into them? And so, yeah, as of last year, I've joined the emerging grassroots trade union called Solidarity Across Land Trades, or SALT. And we are organising to improve working conditions for workers across all land-related trades, starting in the agroecological, because that's where our members are based, and we're very small and very new. But we've got grand ambitions to affiliate and to expand to the conventional sectors once we're more established. And so, yeah, I kind of canvassed some of our SALT members before coming today, and also building on my own research and my experiences, looking at recent reports, of which Naomi's has been really key. And yeah, there's like a bunch of not great working conditions that seem to be quite consistent across many different farms. And yeah, I don't really think I'm going to go into like a huge long list, like rattling them all out, but like absolutely we can talk about some of them later on. But yeah, I just think focusing on like improving sustainable careers is like what my research is looking at. And so in order, how to focus on the retention and the accessibility, and create better careers for people going forwards. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. That's wonderful. All three participants, thank you, because that's a really wide range of experience and skill sets there. And it really, touches me, because I've just trained someone, a new entrant, Dom, on my farm at Coles Hill for a year and a half, and he's leaving after a year and a half. So what you've just said is really resonating. And I had a conversation with several growers already here today about how we retain people. So yeah, maybe this is a great opportunity, unless any of you want to say any more, is to pose questions to the panel, because make use of them turning up. They obviously got an incredible range of experience, and we'd like to hear from the audience. And I have got some questions, but I'll wait for the audience first to participate. Kate.
I guess this isn't really a question, because like you guys have to answer this question, but it's more a general conversation that I think we all need to be having, here and online and everything, which is what we've kind of been just all talking about, which is accessibility. So I'm speaking from a point of view who got into the industry 15 years ago through a 2-year
Pete, could you just repeat the question for the people online? Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Is that any better?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm coming to this question of accessibility in terms of careers and retention from doing a 2-year horticultural apprenticeship, which was paid. So the idea was it was through the Soil Association. You had to be paid at least the minimum wage on your farm, and then you paid your own £600 a year to get the weekends specialised training, 4 weekends a year for 2 years. And I couldn't have done that if I had to work for free, if it was an internship, or if I had a stipend. I had rent to pay. And this was before I had a mortgage and now dependent. So whenever I'm sort of get quite passionate about this question of volunteers, trainees, apprentices, like we desperately need to train up people. There aren't the academic courses necessarily available. And even if they were, you'll still have to pay for those. So obviously the best training is on farm, but then from a farmer's point of view, you're having to pay minimum wage, 10.50 an hour at least, to train up somebody. And that's quite a big gamble for a very small scale farmer. So obviously the answer for a lot of small scale farmers is to use people who are really interested in learning, and then the trade-off is they get training and they don't get paid as much, or they might get paid a token amount, or they might get food and board. But that only suits a very narrow section of society who might have some savings, who are free to move to a farm. And I just feel like I don't know what the answer is other than food should be a more profitable enterprise in order to allow payment for training, allow farmers to pay their staff a fair wage. So yeah, I kind of don't want to rant, but I feel like if someone's working on your farm, you need to pay them, or else you need to give them the equivalent. So whether it's the equivalent amount in training. or the equivalent amount in food and board if that suits the person. Food and board is excellent, but it should be the equivalent of £10–11 an hour wherever you are. So I don't know, just putting that out there, and just be interested to see what everyone's thoughts are on the subject, really. Ranto.
Anyone like to reply?
I can take it.
Yeah.
Check at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you just said. That's like been a really key area for my research, of course, with my traineeship research last year, and also with my current PhD research. And also really agree that there isn't like an easy fix to that. We can't just kind of go around to farms and be like, you have to start paying your trainees now, because of course a lot of them can't do that. But I think it's also really important to recognize, yeah, that being a really key barrier. And that's been something that has been said to me a lot of times, and also a lot of reports have mentioned that this requirement to work for free is like one of the really key stoppages in the industry. I know that, well, I believe that the LWA is currently working on trying to procure public funding for wages for an accredited apprenticeship, and I think stuff like that is a really important step. So organizations that pay staff to try and find funding for different projects, I think funding for training schemes should be like a really, really key priority. And I think this conversation, as far as I'm aware, is only just kind of starting to be had in these spaces about like, oh God, this is an issue, what do we do about it? And I'm hopeful that with all the really innovative minds that there are currently in the sector, we can just start having the conversation in like a non-blaming, non-super emotional way, and just try and find some creative solutions. Because there are farms that do pay their trainees. And so maybe trying to facilitate like farmer to farmer sharing of knowledge of like, okay, how did you get there? What was your transition process to moving away from a reliance on unwaged labor? And for me, that feels like a positive way of doing it, rather than kind of being like, okay, we're waiting for this food systems change, and before that, we can't do anything about it. But yeah, kind of ultimately within like a kind of non-blaming environment, because I don't think it's helpful to just kind of go around and start saying, oh, that's like, you're terrible, because everyone's operating in a really hostile economic environment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think paid funding is a very big, part of it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? No.
Yes, so we have like sort of long-term, sort of as minimum 3-month workers come to Tolhurst, and they get some training and get some money and accommodation and food. It's really difficult to even pay the staff that we have, and in the winter we even had to go down to 4 days a week. So it's a lot of pressure. I mean, I think possibly what we need is like some like the OGA or an external sort of body to help farms, because we're farmers, we're so busy, like just growing the food. We need someone to like write the grants and get the funding for us. Like we're happy to put in all the hours and the work and grow the food, but we don't have the time, or that's not necessarily our expertise in applying for grants and things like that. And we're in a position now where we need someone to help us get these grants and access this funding, because everything's gone up, even our rent's going up soon, and we're facing the beginning of a year having lost a lot to some severe frosts in the winter. Where we thought we were in a good position, we had a lot of crops in the ground, and then all of a sudden overnight they're gone. It was a hard thing to come to terms with. Obviously Tolhurst has been going for a long time, and they've overcome many obstacles, and the Toll is always very positive, even if other people are unsure. I think that's somewhere where, like maybe the OGA could step in, that would be really helpful, actually. So I did an apprenticeship on a stipend. I think I got £35 a week, something, for 2 years. And then as soon as I started out to pay for accommodation, it was really difficult, and I had to leave, because I couldn't survive like that. But yeah.
Thanks, Sparrow. I mean, I think, yeah, Lawrence, the experience of the apprenticeship scheme, which the Soil Association became defunct, was that most growers weren't able to pay the a wage. So this conversation is highly important, I think, because we do need, I think, funding to maybe get trainees to a certain level. And I mean, yeah.
Can I just say one more thing quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry, quickly before your question. Something I forgot to say is that I think that regulation is a really important step as well, like irrespective of payment. In that a lot of the trainees I spoke to had a really great time, but a significant minority really didn't. And there's, even with the ones who enjoyed their experience, there was quite an alarming amount of like lack of actual training happening on the training scheme. So people are really just essentially being treated as an unwaged member of staff. And so I think like that's a really key area of tension, to make sure that when these schemes, especially if they're being advertised on the AGA forum or the LWA forum or whatever, to make sure they're actually providing what they're saying they're providing. I know the LWA has recently put out a curriculum, which is a really great step, but yeah, I don't know what that regulation could look like, but I think that could be a really good beginning step. And also, yeah, specifically as well for accommodation to be regulated. I heard some like really shocking stories of what people were put in, like lack of showers, being put in tents, stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, to make sure it's actually of a good standard.
Thank you. I'm not sure what Lawrence is going to say, but I've always argued strongly that it should be in the standards, there should be an ethical standard for employment. Lawrence.
Yeah, actually,
Sorry, Naomi. Yeah.
Actually, Nell, I think you have somewhat answered the question I was going to ask. So,
Okay.
actually, I have two questions. Could you tell us, just say what this union, this burgeoning union is? I missed the name of it and what it's meant to be doing.
Sure. So it's called Solidarity Across Land Trades, or SALT for short. So we have about 80 members currently, and we're in the process of trying to find affiliation. So we're not going to create our kind of brand new union, because that's creates an incredible amount of paperwork. What we're going to do is get an established trade union and form a branch of that union. And so we've currently got a list of demands, and we're sending that out quite soon. So we're hopeful in the next few months we should be able to be a branch of a union, so we can start providing legal support for workers. And it's specifically for workers, so it's non-management levels, and nobody who can hire and fire. It's like freelancers, employees, workers, trainees, volunteers, all of those kind of people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just picking up on this one. Absolutely agree. What everyone says about the need for proper wages and facilities and so on. No doubt about it. The point has already been made that actually it's very difficult for small farmers to, and even large farmers would argue, it's difficult for them to pay for it. So that is an issue. The other one actually is that we can't assume that farmers are good trainers. And even the ones that are, it's a big resource commitment to take on a trainee, an apprentice, and train them properly. Leaving aside the fact that probably a year or 18 months is not really a good enough time anyway, long enough time anyway. So I think we should maybe look more at beyond individual farms and training or apprentice schemes that deal with groups of farms that have got a trainer, somebody in charge of apprenticeships or traineeships on a group of farms, which comes back then to the funding. And the market's not going to do this is clear. I mean, and I think from where we are, the Land Works Alliance thing of public funding or citizen funding is good, but it's really a demand or a scheme that we have to put to philanthropic foundations. Instead of spending money on report after report after report, policy study after policy study, on a number of areas, these foundations have actually got to start putting money into banks and funds that provide consistent ongoing support for these kinds of things. Only one area. But we fiddle around unless we can get that kind of consistent support from pooled funding from philanthropic institutions.
That's a great point, Lawrence, and we have noted it. I see Jim writing that down.
Yeah, I agree with that. So this work that I've been doing is also a collaboration with the Land in Our Names and Landworkers Alliance, and I think they would have perhaps varying perspectives on this matter. Land in Our Names operates very much within a reparative justice framework, and so I mean I was speaking to Jacina yesterday from Land in Our Names, and she was basically saying, you know, with all the money that exists in the world, there's no reason for people to be paid shit wages, basically. So the money exists, and maybe it is a case of, you know, philanthropic foundations that should be funding this, or the money is there. It's just about not normalizing, I think, the poor conditions that people will be willing to work for in order to have the opportunity actually to work on an organic farm. Of the new entrants that I spoke to, one of them had trained in conventional farming and seemed to have absolutely no problem finding people that would pay him good money to do that. So I think that's also something to consider. A couple of people actually that I spoke to had received their training in conventional farming, and one of them had then gone into agroecological. And yeah, I think that for marginalized people of color that are already very much, in some instances, going against their culture to pursue a career in farming, already have a lot of pressure from their families to make money. They're expected to become doctors, engineers, work in IT, and now they're saying, no, I'm going to go and become a farmer, and I'm not going to even get paid properly. There's a lot of pressure there, and it's just not possible for a lot of people to even conceive of doing an unpaid traineeship in that cultural context. Yeah,
that's a great point. Can I just go? I think Tony, my eyesight's dreadful, but I think Tony's got his hand up. Is that you, Tony?
It is, yeah. I just wanted to bring in some questions and some comments from the chat and the online participants. First is really a request, if perhaps would all the panels be willing to put their contact details into the chat. And that in particular, Mick Marston, who's one of our directors, has asked if you can contact him because there's somebody in Unite who he believes might be supportive. So if you're willing to do that. So the second thing is a question from Liz Charles, and the question is, how many established growers earn a living wage?
Oh. Well done, Liz. No comment, Liz. But Pete wants to say something to that.
The organic forum Facebook thing. There was a chat which started off about wages, and several people commented and saying, I'm paying myself, I'm paying myself. Now that can work if you own the land and you can offset some of the living costs against your business, things like that. A lot of people don't. A lot of people get to. So yeah, all this is the same issue, but it's very kind of this week that's been discussed. I made a living wage when I was working at Henry. That's mainly because we had a good market and a massive glass house, and a very entrepreneurial partner. So it's possible. Well, yeah, maybe not, but it is possible. But you know, everybody needs certain keys to make it work, and one of those may be access to land, having good land, good soil, owning. I've been growing for 25 years, never owned any land, and now working at school. I feel like I could run a farm quite comfortably if I had the investment capital to start it off. We've got a lot of people feel the same way. But yeah, I've never been able to get over that hurdle of owning land.
Any more online, Tony? He's gone. He's disappeared.
No, that's it for now.
That's it. Well done, Tony.
Keep your questions coming.
Yes, please.
Given the likes of this given the like systemic lack of access to training and resources for like people of colour and minorities, are there people who exist who can be on boards of organisations like this? Have you found those people who like have the like experience of getting like they must exist, but like do they have the time and the resources and the like whatever they need in order to like come into an organization that's got an established like precedent of white straight men running their like being on the directors boards and things? Like what needs to happen to get those people involved?
Great, thank you.
Actually, while you're answering that, could you talk about the recommendation?
Just briefly. Thanks, Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a really great specific question. I mean, I can't speak for the people that I have spoken to or people that I know. A few people come to mind of like, oh yeah, I think that they would probably sit quite well and have a lot to contribute. And I think in terms of what needs to happen, I don't know if they have the time or the resources, and I don't really know what's involved with being on a board or, you know, but I think that it's a bit of a give and take, oh, not give and take, but chicken and egg situation, maybe. I think people want to see that an organization is already committed and doing things in terms of diversity, anti-oppression, anti-racism, before they would be willing to put themselves in that situation. Because if you are to come into an organization, and to be honest with you guys, I really don't know very much about Organic Growers Alliance, so I'm just speaking more broadly here, but if you're coming into an organization and having to constantly be fighting for every suggestion that you want to make, that's not going to be an enjoyable thing, especially if you're doing that on any kind of voluntary basis or anything. So there needs to be a certain level of receptivity, I think, and evidence of actions that have been taken and commitments that have been made. That's what I would see as being kind of like the egg. Yeah.
Well, that's 2 or 3 really, really clear indications for the OGA, I would say, you know.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, 5 recommendations. Is that a serious request? So the 5 recommendations are based around narratives, shifting narratives, and that's narratives around perceived incompetence that a lot of Black people and people of colour face, people just assuming that they don't know how to grow things or that they don't have any experience when they might actually have a whole host of experience. And that, again, this perception that Black people don't farm, when actually, you know, we know that if we think on a global perspective, that most of the farmers around the world are not white people. And then kind of the next level would be changing the workplace culture on farms and in farming organisations, so that when new entrants, for example, go to do a traineeship in rural Wales, they don't have to put up with overt racism and have nobody around them that's saying, you know, that's not okay and we need to do something differently about that. And I think some people have had quite scarring experiences that have, there are people that I've spoken to that nearly got put off pursuing this pathway. And so that makes me think there must be a whole host more people that did get put off after an initial experience. Developing strategies of support for emerging and for established BPOC farmers, maintaining and creating spaces for healing and knowledge exchange. And that is, you know, healing from racial trauma that people have experienced either in farms or also just in their lives, to be honest with you. And I think that a lot of this, the exclusion from the farming industry careers also very much relates to exclusion of people of colour from natural spaces and from rural areas more generally. And we know that working with the land can be a very important soul healing practice. Building current networks that exist so that people don't have to face these feelings of isolation, and creating more access to land. That's actually 6 things.
Thank you, that's wonderful. And what sprung to my mind is that, you know, the AGA maybe should get our skates on and put together a policy statement on, even if we can't get this into standards immediately, because I can see that that's going to be a lot longer, but we need to start somewhere, and maybe the AGA could start with a policy statement on inclusion for BPOC and new entrants and how trainees are treated. I think that's another key area which I think we are slightly missing within the but forgive me if I'm wrong, Jim, there. But it's a great starting place. That's all I'm trying to say. This is a great starting place for the OGA to go forward from. Yeah, Jim.
Just a couple of questions. One is the old barriers to new entrants and black and people of colour. How much is it a general sort of systemic problem with what's going on in Britain and land use, food and farming? And how much are organisations like the AGA and other part of the organic sector movement actually part of the problem with our own practices? Are we contributing to it rather than being part of the solution, whether it's making our feet on it or actually something getting straight wrong?
Sorry, Pete, before you answer that, can you just clarify the question for the people online? We struggled to get that.
Jim, so can you clarify that?
Can you hear through here? Is this all right?
Much better.
Yeah. We should get closer to this.
It's just that with all the sort of problems facing new entrants and black and people of colour, how far is it a general problem with British society and land use and management and the food system? How far are the OGA and organic and agroecological organisations being part of the problem rather than the solution, whether it's from dragging our feet on issues or just from getting things straight wrong?
Right. Silence from online. Anyone like to contribute from the panel?
Well, okay. So how do we encourage more new entrants? Is it the fault of the OGA and these groups is the question?
Are we contributing?
I don't know, maybe there could be more outreach to new entrants and make it more appealing for people to become growers. Often I think that people can get off put for many reasons. One is like the low wage, 2 is the living conditions, 3 is the hard work. There is a lack of weekends, the lack of support. You know, I don't know, maybe there's more outreach that could be done online and at these events that are happening. I think these on-farm events are quite good that you're planning this year to bring people in. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say really. Yeah,
I could add, I'm at risk of getting a little bit theoretical here with that question. But I think that if you're not receiving any pushback in terms of the things that you're trying to do, then you're probably just supporting the status quo. And it's when you're trying to enact things or trying to do things and there's a real tension and discomfort around those things, that's when you know that actually you're probably moving into the sticky places that that real more radical change is going to occur. And that's also the reason why I push more strongly for narrative change and culture shifts, because it's very easy to you know, kind of do things that will help, you know, say, oh, look, we've had this many more new entrants this year, but you might have put them all into terrible working conditions. And yeah, then you're not contributing to helping the problem, really, you're making it worse. So yeah, I think the things that feel most uncomfortable are the directions in which we need to move.
Thank you.
So yeah, quite a lot of these problems are like definitely really structural, like kind of food systems change and housing and rental markets. Like, yeah, absolutely, that's not in the OGA or anyone else's control, really. But I do think that like the organic and agroecological movement has really neglected farm workers and hasn't had farm workers in their discussion. It's been much more centered towards farm owners and farm managers. And I think that when people think about a kind of typical family farm or an agroecological farm or farmers, we think about somebody in a position of authority. And I think the movement really hasn't been worker-led. So people in positions of authority are typically farm owners and managers. And like a huge part of that is also because of experience, sure. But I think there could have been earlier a recognition of the lack of worker. As you were saying before, it's really important about who's in positions of authority, right? And to invite those who aren't kind of farm owners into positions of authority. And that's an area which is why SALT's been created, to kind of fill that gap, an area which is just worker controlled, worker kind of owned, like a safe space where we can all talk and discuss issues. And I think, yeah, for me, that seems to be quite a key area where the movement has been slow. Although, yeah, definitely starting to see change in that, which is really exciting as well.
Thank you. Lawrence, in a minute. Well, everyone's spoken actually who's got their hand up, so I'm going to have to take it in the middle. Yeah.
Just about the Organic Growers Alliance specifically, and it may have changed because I think I signed up 3 or 4 years ago, but I think there was a thing about which farm are you from when I signed up, and I was a new entrant and I was like, I'm not, and that felt off-putting, but it may have changed. So
could you just expand on why it was off-putting? Because I sort of got it, but I didn't
feel like there was a box for me.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah.
No, when I joined the Organic Growers Alliance as a member.
Yeah. So they asked you that question. I can't.
It may have.
Yeah, I imagine.
Or,
I don't think so.
That might have been when there were people were looking into like group membership. So whether the farm joins as an organisation or individuals, but I don't know.
I don't think there's any exclusivity about who can join as part of a farm. I don't think you don't have to be part of a farm to join, as far as I'm aware.
I might be.
Yeah.
Probably the name doesn't help. It just implies that you are part of.
Sure. Well, I'm not. Yeah, we'll talk about that over a cup of tea. Lawrence. Yeah.
I apologise about being it's never been meant to be exclusive. It's just, you know, the sort of law of unintended effects. Somehow when we're out for more data, it can be sounding exclusive. It's never meant to be like that. Sorry.
Thanks, Jim.
Sorry to interrupt, folks. We're struggling a bit with those last couple of points to hear online. But...
Okay, can someone briefly, quickly before Lawrence, Jim, can you just give Tony a synopsis of that?
Is this working?
No, I think you're going to have to come to this one, Jim, for online. Is that right?
Working?
It should be. You just need to hold.
Can you hear Danny going?
Tony?
Yeah, he can. Yep.
Oh, well, shall I summarize?
Yes, please do. Lawrence, sorry, yes.
Okay, the 2 points. The last one is a point that some of the OGA forms, when people were filling them in, asked which farm you were from, and that was off-putting. That seemed to kind of put you in a box of farmer, non-farmer as a bit off-putting, and though as Jim explained, that was not the intention. So need to look at that. The question before, I can't remember.
We've lost our way a bit there with Tony, but hopefully that explains, unless you want to
But I think it might, leading on from actually a thing that Nell said that I'd like to just qualify a bit. This is the point you made about the agroecological movement or the organic movement not recognizing workers and so on. One of the striking things about the organic grower movement, and it's actually a preamble to a question to Sparrow, is one of the striking things is how many people from working class backgrounds got into organic production through OGA, through the Organic Growers Association, first of all, Organic Growers Alliance. There's a relatively, compared to agriculture as a whole, large number of people from non-farming working class backgrounds in the organic growing community. Now, those people doing that they're working not necessarily as owners. Their engagement is not as owners, and quite often people are renting land. So they're the workers themselves. So it might be different. What you've said might be accurate for larger scale farms who are seeing people as workers as opposed to, but I think it's somewhat different in the organic growing community. I don't want to stretch that point because you know, I don't know how credible it is, how far it goes, but I think it's something that you should actually consider and look at, if you know, in making that statement. That comes to my point about my question to Sparrow, and again linking to something Naomi said, which is this narrative and expectation from your background about being a grower or being in farming. And as I said, the number of people coming from working class backgrounds into organic growing, I think, is relatively high. But all of them that I've known about have stepped outside of the expectation of their family or their background. They're doing something for a reason, often to do with sustainability, often to do with ethics, and they've made that move against, in a sense, the understanding and knowledge of their background. And I think I wonder whether or not whether you, Sparrow, had that obstacle of, you know, does your family understand? Does your community, how many people you went to school with are in growing or farming in any way? I would guess it's small. Did you see that kind of, was that an obstacle? And if it is, maybe it's something the organic community needs to be doing about in talking to working class communities as well as ethnicity communities about the acceptability and the validity of going into organic production.
Thanks, Lawrence.
I didn't really find it an obstacle. I found people quite supportive. Where I'm from, most of the industry is like glass factories. And yeah, I know a lot of people still in that now, and it's not something I ever wanted to get into, even though that goes back a couple of generations in my family. My grandpa was a glass blower and my dad worked in glass, and my other granddad. But yeah, it did come from a desire to do something good or contribute something good to society. I got into biodynamics partly because of the sort of spiritual element of it, and sort of then stepped into stock free because of animal rights and the vegan movement and the stock free movement. And for me, that sat well with me, and that's the direction I wanted to go. I don't know. It was quite easy for me to transition into that because I'd spent my 20s just traveling around as a musician. I didn't have to step out of some sort of working environment. I'd sort of sustain myself from playing music, and so going into the land was kind of almost grounding and gave me structure. And I didn't mind working for a stipend because, you know, anything was all right. You know, a roof over my head and some good food. But I think now as a family man, I enjoy the stability or the grounding of being able to provide healthy food, as well as being able to see my family to be there, like on the land where I live, and for that to be, for my son to be around me all the time in a way, or just a couple of minutes away, I can go see him if I need to. So I don't know, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but yeah, no, it's something also that from my family really supportive, because they get to eat good vegetables as well, and it's a healthy, I mean, I say it's healthy, it's a very healthy lifestyle, that physical and eating a lot of good food, but also I'm aware that it can be quite hazardous as well, which is also worrying for my family, working on a tractor on my own in the field, probably not the most practical hairstyle for that as well. So I have to be very careful around machinery. But yeah, and I like this month I sustained 2 injuries and had to be off work, which comes to the low wage, and then not, in this country, if you're injured, you don't get much money if you're on for sick pay. So like that's something that would be worth covering as well, like thinking about, like, as this is quite a hazardous industry, like maybe not if you just working with hand tools, but if you're working with heavy machinery, then how do we support these growers who do get injured and can't work, and then have bills to pay and families to support, and also when they get older and they want to step back, well, how do we support them, or their back gives in or whatever. So the food for thought for the movement.
I'm aware you got your hand up, Tony.
I just want to make a point about the health and safety and injury. That's like a really key point that people have said to me, trainees last year, that I don't think maybe one person that I spoke to knew of a health and safety procedure that was like accurate and wasn't just like wear hard boots. And yeah, agriculture is the most dangerous profession in the UK, and obviously that's, if you're just on like a community garden using a hoe, it's going to be quite different, but you're still repetitive strain injuries like musculoskeletal, bending over from steep labor. That's the #1 injury that all farmer workers get, no matter if they're working with pesticides or whatever, and so that's super common. And also this real lack of understanding of what would happen if you were injured on the farm. And so specifically, I think if you're an informal labourer, if you're a trainee, a volunteer, if you're not going through the books, or if you're self-employed, to understand what your rights are in that moment, what kind of benefits you can claim, what's going to happen to your position on the farm if you're working for your accommodation, and to have that really laid out in the beginning, I think is really important. And yeah, I also wanted to slightly draw back to your previous point about like the responsibility of organizations like the OGA. And I think a really key area for that is you have a jobs forum, right? And so you're advertising jobs on the jobs forum. And so I think when you're advertising jobs, I know it's like a very informal thing, people just post things up there, you are kind of essentially giving that place your like tick box blessing in some way if you're looking as an employee. And so I think it's really important to really think about what farms are, what deal are they offering, what are they, like, is it actually a farm which you know of, is it one farm which you've never heard about, or like, I haven't got the answer for this regulation, but it's like, this is important if you're hosting, if you're like essentially promoting a job somewhere.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't actually considered that link, but it does open up a whole Pandora's box of questions about what sort of role the OGA has, and I suspect we haven't got that sort of remit, but it's a very interesting observation, and I will think about that from my own farm's perspective as well. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, Kate Collins. No. Oh, sorry, Tony. Sorry, can I just check that Tony had his hand up for quite a long time. Tony.
No, again, it's bringing in comments from online. We're jumping back a little bit, but first of all, just a question whether to the panelists whether we can share your contact details with certainly the people online in the group. So
there's a nodding going on. Is that okay, or you okay? Contact details? Yeah. Yes, there's an agreement. general agreement. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And the second is to go back to a comment that Phil's made in the chat, which I think goes back to when we were talking about engagement. Phil says one reason we went away from the annual Organic Matters conference was a lack of new entrants attending, and that actually more on-farm events and engaging with other events was the way in which new entrants would really want to work with us.
Again,
right.
Interesting question. Thanks, Phil, for that one. Kate, thanks, Tony.
Right, just wanted to make 2 quick points following on from Jim's question really about the OGA and the wider organic industry. Are we actively getting in the way, making it worse, or are we just not doing enough to make it easier? One thing I don't think it's an OGA issue, but where, again, going back to my original point of payment is, you know, the culture of working for free, I think, is a massive barrier for anyone who can't afford it. So I feel like the whole industry is, you know, as it goes on, that's actively stopping certain people from feeling like they can join that industry. But also, I did an interview with the Soil Association for International Women's Day a couple of weeks ago, which I felt very uncomfortable about. Like, I'm just going to speak for 50% of the population. But we were talking about visibility and accessibility. And I just made the point of, you know, when I was at school, it was never a careers option. So just making farming more of a careers option in all schools, not just those in rural areas. I didn't go to school in a rural area. Wasn't at all my background, so I don't know if that's something that the OGA could engage actively with, to maybe, if we, you know, some of us are going into schools to talk about, hey, you could be a farmer or grower too, and maybe there's some guidance or templates that the OGA doesn't necessarily have to come up with, but could facilitate sharing amongst other growers to do the same. Just I'm happy to help with that as well. So yeah, not quite sure what I don't know if it's a question.
That's okay. It was a good point. Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Lizzie, what timing are we on? Where have we got to? 15 minutes. Okay, we've got 15 minutes. So let's make the best of it. It's been really, really stimulating so far. So yes, please.
Sorry to chime in again. I guess I have a general question about, because I've just started a market garden and was a new entrant and volunteered for several years, and then got a job on a pack line for a veg box company who basically made the jobs were funded by the fact that they bought in wholesale and buffered, like supplemented their own products with other things so that they could have a reliable offering year round. And that's how they had viable jobs. I didn't pay myself last year, and I actually don't necessarily know when I'm going to be able to pay myself a full wage for all of the work that I do. And I guess with the unpaid traineeships, I think there's a question around what are you training people into? Because if you need to not pay your trainees in order to make your business work, then they're learning a system that needs unpaid trainees in order, like if they go and start a farm, what model have they learned that they then have to take on unpaid trainees? And I guess, do any of you guys have thoughts about that, having done unpaid traineeships, and what you learned, and did you actually see a model for a profitable way of growing organic produce?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. I did one, and I would say that I didn't learn a profitable way of farming on that traineeship. It was a beautiful place, but it definitely didn't provide me with the skills that I needed or would need if I wanted to start my own project after that, which actually I did, because I started a small market garden in the Farm Start network, and then worked part-time at another farm. And it was working part-time at this other farm where they didn't have any unwaged labour, where I actually learned the techniques that I needed to make my small market garden really profitable and really efficient. I think I had quite an obviously extreme experience in that. But I really agree with your point as well. I think that some of the farms, this is how they reproduce themselves, this is how they survive. And if we're not challenging those techniques and we're not challenging this normalization of a reliance on unwaged labor, then I think we're just going to be having more of the same in the future. And we're going to be having this conversation in 20 years time, which, yeah, isn't something that I would like to see in the sector.
Yeah, that plays into very clearly.
For a second, sorry.
Sorry, who's that?
I think,
Tony,
can you just tell us who's answering that question? And when you ask questions for the floor, it would really help us guys online if you would just say who you are.
Did everyone hear that? Could you just say who you are, please? It's helpful. Sorry. Did you hear that, Tony? No, they didn't hear that. Yeah. Yeah.
It was Adrian from Sweet Pea Market Garden.
Did you hear that, Adrian from Sweet Pea Market Garden? Just to reiterate that.
Great, thanks guys. Sorry to interrupt.
We're not entirely sure what you can and can't hear, or I'm not. Sorry. Who was next? Yes, sorry.
What did you say? Okay, yeah. So I think that this is like a tricky point so a lot of this agroecological sector is very value driven, and a lot of that value is around, you know, ecological restoration more than profit, and so it can be very anti-capitalist, and that kind of moves away from the idea of having, you know, a profitable, viable, sustainable business model. And one of the people that I spoke to, Sel, she runs a flower farm, and she's very, very focused on her business model. I would say more so even than, she's a very, very skilled grower, and she really knows what she's doing, but she spends a lot of time calculating the business expenses of her model, and she makes sure that she can pay her trainee a London living wage, a living wage, I think, at least. And I think you make a really good point there that is, Adrienne, that there's a need there to have more business training for people that are entering and also people that have existing farms. Yeah.
Thank you. That's quite an interesting point, actually, because I'm doing a coaching thing called Ness with LWA DEFRA backing at the moment. It's a trial project, but it is about business, actually. Funnily enough, I thought it was about growing to start with, and then suddenly I realized it was about business. So yeah, there is a recognition that business is actually really important. So this plays into this conversation big time, I think.
No, actually, she told me something that I found really interesting. She said that within flower growing, she's noticed that people that own land, like they've inherited it or they just happen to be landowners, they have less successful business models than people that have to pay rent for their land.
This is what we were talking about in the car on the way.
Right. Because sometimes you need that pressure of knowing, you know, I have to make a profit out of this in order to actually put the things in place to have a viable model.
Such a valid point. That's a really interesting point. Okay. Pete Dollamore. Oh no, well, we should find it out between yourselves.
Yeah, I've got the director OGA. It's just actually to make a quick point. This isn't just a discussion that we want to leave here, but we've got in about 10 days time a strategy meeting where we're getting together directors and ex-directors with others to really try and forge forward with what we're doing on the whole issue of new entrants and training. And it's going to be directly informed by this discussion here today and the survey we put out. So just think that when this session ends, any thoughts you have, keep them coming, send them direct to us. We want to take this really seriously and make ongoing progress on it, not just do something one on. And like really thank all the panel for what they've said.
Yeah, I was going to say this at the end, but I actually think that's what I've got written down, which is continue you've actually answered the question. So continue the narrative and create allies. And that's not a word I've been particularly familiar with as an old white man grower, but that's what my wife prompted me to, and she started having a conversation with me about allies, and she's run various charities. So it's very interesting, you know, this whole idea about allies, and I think I would really suggest that would be a great way for the OGA to progress. Pete.
Yeah, my point is on transparency, so that if you are in a position of authority in a business, that it's very easy for the finances to not be visible to your workers, and if you're not being paid as much as you're paying them, they only know it if you say that, and then they might not believe it. And so actually having some kind of financial transparency in your organisation, whatever the organisation is, I think really helps keep things on revenue. There's very few people in this business who are making it.
Which doesn't say a lot, I have to say. It says more about what we're, you know, that we're actually doing it for agroecological reasons and for more sort of high-end reasons, you know. And I think that has always been a bit of a conflict with me, that, you know, you have to make a profit to actually get the agroecological outcomes. So, Lawrence.
It's so Lawrence Woodward. It's just a question as to, is there really a reliance in the organic growing community on wage labour, or to what extent?
On wage labour or unwaged?
Unwaged labour.
Unwaged. Sorry, I didn't.
Is that? I mean, how extensive is this reliance? Is it really a reliance, or is it a reliance on low-paid people or unwaged people at some times of the year? I mean, I'm not. Sorry, I'm not.
No. That's a nuanced question, and I understand that. Yeah.
You know, you made the point that there is a reliance on wage or trainee labour that's not paid. I wonder how extensive that reliance actually is.
You're saying we should be careful, Lawrence, that we don't slip into make it. No, I know. Okay. Sorry, I'm not going to paraphrase.
My name is Nick, and I work just out of Bristol at the community farm, and as a seasonal worker there last year and part of the Land Workers Alliance traineeship scheme, which ran in the Southwest, which I think cost £25,000 to run and was grant funded and is not running again this year. I was one of the few people on the scheme, there's maybe about 30 of us, that actually received a wage. And I felt very grateful for that. But most of the other people were unwaged labour or food for some sort of thing. So it's like really clear that it was like very widespread, I think. And yeah, we visited a number of farms. I thought the whole scheme was brilliant in terms of connecting with other trainees and getting lots of learning from other growers. But I think I only visited one, and we like went through the finances with them, and made like they broke even and paid everyone proper wage. A number of others were kind of referring how they do break even or make it work, but yeah, we kind of asked them that, do you pay your trainees, and the answer was no. So yeah, I think it was quite widespread.
Yes, please.
Hi, yeah, my name's Tim. Well, I was just wondering, with regards to what the gentleman here just said, couldn't you just do a survey of your members and ask them when they have workers, whether they pay them? That might be the easiest way of finding out the definitive answer.
People fill it in.
Well, that's always going to be the case with humans, I'm afraid.
Where are you from, Tim? Sorry.
I'm not actually from a farm.
No, okay, that's fine.
I worked last year as a woofer.
Great.
So I was unpaid.
Yeah.
I basically got lodging and food.
Yeah.
And I knew that, and I accepted that, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I couldn't sustain that obviously any longer, so I've had to go back to my normal work.
Yeah.
But but then I want to do another season next year to learn again, in the attempt to try and start. But one of the biggest problems is access to land for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, coloured or whatever ethnicity. The access to land is incredibly expensive. It's incredibly expensive to live in this country in comparison to like somewhere like France, which is a lot cheaper. Unfortunately, our prices here are driven down so low by the supermarkets that that's another problem. The only thing I can see on the horizon that might help is that I know that in Asia now, a lot of Australian farmers are selling, if they can guarantee the bionutrient density of their foods, they're now starting to get a premium of about 25% if they can, and I can see that starting to shift. I can see more and more people wanting to know, you know, what is my food really good quality? And I don't know whether it's a gimmick, but I know that you can test certain things with a, I can't remember what it is, spectrometer or something like that. But I know there is a device that's being developed in America that you can just go in, point it at a vegetable, and it will tell you what certain nutrients. I think that we are going to start to shift over to that more and more. So it'll be niche, but I think it will grow.
Thanks, Tim. Jim, will you look after the microphone?
I could say something.
Yeah, yes, Sparrow.
Just going to say really sorry.
Sorry, guys, we've got a few issues on the floor.
It was just to say really briefly that I'd see a problem in any survey the OGA did, because the data would be quite selective who chose to answer it, and we may not get that many. We wouldn't end up with valuable data from it. I think it'd need to be a bigger survey done by somebody who to get good value.
Can I add to that point quickly? Shall I shout and then maybe you might?
Yeah, just briefly because Sparrow wants to say
Yeah, sorry. I think we did do a survey last year looking at more workers' point of view. So do you get paid?
I was just saying we did a survey last year, more from the workers' point of view. Do you get paid? Do you get a stipend? That kind of thing. But it might be quite interesting to do a very brief survey from the farm's point of view, but also going back to what Nell was saying about trying not to use pejorative language of, do you use free labour? You know, that kind of for interest. You know, it would be really helpful to know numbers of.
You don't know.
Exactly, and try and keep it as neutral as possible.
Yeah.
I think in a way it's not even numbers, it's the percentage of the work that gets done on the farm that is done in an unpaid way, which isn't quite the same as how many bods, is it? You know, like you've got a lot of work going on in the summer, you've got 3 woofers. That's a percentage of work, it's not a percentage of people.
Yeah, as I said, it's extremely nuanced, this conversation that Lawrence has stimulated. Sparrow wants to contribute.
Well, we have a lot of people applying to come visit and work at Tolhurst Organic because of the work that we do there. They're really interested. We try to get them to do work that is not the essential work, but at the same time they want to do that because they want to learn the workings of the farm. I think there's a lot of pressure on organic farms to give training and to do this, but we have to remember that we're farmers, that our job's to grow food. We also need to get new entrants and we need to train them, but we need support in order to do that. And that shouldn't just fall on us to offer that as a service without any support, because we have enough work to do anyway. In a way, the easiest way or most economical way for us to do it is unfortunately, is simply for the employees there just to work more, you know, rather than have somebody else that you have to train up all the time, and especially if they're changing. Unfortunately, for us, sometimes it means that we just have to work longer hours and weekends and everything, and because we know the job and it's quicker and easier. So if there is a need for more training, we need more support from outside rather than relying or finger pointing and saying, look, you need to do it and you need to pay these people, because, you know, we need to pay our own staff as it is, and we need to get the job done effectively and economically and quickly and done well as well.
Good point. Yeah, no.
I think there's also, so I guess my kind of seasonal labourer role that I did at a farm, which was paid, I wouldn't have said you needed really any experience to do that role. You needed to be generally fit and enthusiastic and able to take quite simple directions, but I was mainly doing weeding. I wasn't really working with any machinery and harvesting. But I know that I only got that role because I had done a traineeship. I'd also done a diploma before then as well. And I think there is a bit of a blockage with farms who are taking on paid staff to consider hiring people for what are essentially like very base layer just labouring roles that haven't got any experience. Like, not everybody needs to be trained up to be able to take on their own market garden. You can also just have people enter the industry and have like really kind of equitable paid entry level seasonal labouring roles that haven't had a huge amount of training behind them. And I think it's quite rare. I don't think I've ever really seen a paid minimum wage role which is just kind of standard labouring, which doesn't require like significant voluntary experience beforehand. And I think, yeah, that's quite a key area that could be changed.
Thanks, Nell. I think we've got one minute and enough for just very quick, brief question. Has anyone got a burning question? No? Okay.
I can comment on that.
Yeah, quickly.
I would say, like, I've met fruit pickers who like are seasonal, who get paid a very decent wage, and they are just like quick picking, and there's a whole barrel about that, and them having to be paid by weight and all of that. But what other industries don't pay their trainees is my question, because my previous work experience is in hospitality, and I worked in a coffee shop, and like I got paid minimum wage as soon as I went in there, and that there are jobs on farms that are not glamorous, but like, and this is coming from someone who isn't paying themselves currently, so it's more of a thought than a actualized. I don't have the answers.
Thank you, that's brilliant, and thank you to the members in the audience, but I'd also like to thank the three people on this panel. They've been absolutely fantastic. Your range of knowledge. Just very briefly, I mean, what for me has been so stimulating is that Jim has actually said that this is going to be a conversation that we take into board meetings and actually formulate our ongoing policy. So I think, yeah, thank you so much for contributing to that, because I think it's what we've needed, that stimulation to actually take these things and these issues straight into policy. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Take one of those.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I love one, thanks. Oh, sorry. Sorry, online people, are we going for lunch? What's happening? Yes, we're going for lunch, and thank you so much for your contribution. I've been told off. Thanks everyone.
Thanks folks, well done.
I know a few faces there.